welcome to the US MMA Sea Life Chronicles. Today we're going to be talking with Midshipman John Cairns. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
Give us an insider perspective on what Sea Year is all about. And so without further ado, we'll dive into talking about working at sea. But just to give a little background to our viewers, how do you get your Sea Year assignment? What's the procedure for going from the academy to whatever your assignment is? And do you go with people? Can you just fill us in on a little background?
Sure. So you start your plebe year at the academy. You do the whole year, all 3 trimesters there, and then you go out to sea at the end of that. So the process for that can be quite laborious because everybody at the academy is signed an ATR, and that means Academy Training Representative. So there's 3 ATRs, or there's 4 ATRs currently. 3 give out ship assignments, and it's split up with the northeast, the southeast, and then out west.
Okay.
So me being from North Carolina, I was assigned to the southeast ATR, and you have meetings with him to gauge what you're interested in, who your Sea Year partner is going to be, and you do get to pick that. And then, so you'll have meetings discussing what you want to do, ship you want to be on. And then when one becomes available, he'll assign you. You don't really get that much of a choice. And then you go out to sea.
Okay, and you said you were able to choose your Sea Year partner. Can you pick another engineer, or does it have to be, so what's the distinction? How do you choose your partner?
Usually first sailing, it has to be of the opposite major. So as an engineering major, I had to pick a deck major. But then second sailing, you can have multiple engineers on a ship, multiple deckies on a ship. It's a little less stringent.
Okay. All right, so let's turn to working at sea. So as an engineer, I'm assuming you're going to work in the engine room. That's typically your station, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Is there a typical routine when you're in the engine room, or is it just day by day?
Every day is structured the same, so you come down, depending on the ship, you come down at a certain time. On my first ship, I had to report at 0800. On my second ship, I had to report at 0600. And then you'll work up, on my second ship, I worked up till breakfast. Breakfast was 0730 to 0800. Went back down to worked until coffee. Coffee was 10 o'clock, 10:30, and then I worked from coffee until lunch, which was at noon. And then at 1300, we come back down, work until coffee again, which is 1500 to 15:30, and then until dinner, which is at 1700.
Okay.
But then what we do each day varies, but that's the basic routine.
And so how would you get your assignment for the day?
Every morning, we have a mandated safety meeting, and the first engineer generally told me what to do. He'd assign me whatever task he thought I could do and needed to be done.
Okay. And typically, how many other people would be working with you in the engine room?
Usually, on any given ship, you'll have chief engineer, first engineer, second engineer, and a third engineer, and these are all licensed. And then there's unlicensed crew, which may include a QMed, a wiper, an oiler, a goodie, which is a general utility deck engine. So you can have any combination of those.
Okay. And so can you give us a general idea about what it's like working in the engine room? I assume it's probably pretty noisy and maybe pretty hot, depending on where you are in the world.
Absolutely. It definitely is very noisy. You have to wear earplugs or else you're going to lose your hearing real quick.
Mm-hmm.
It's hot, no matter where you are in the world. Just some places are a lot hotter than others.
Right.
It's definitely a lot of physical activity because you're going to have at least 3 different levels, and you gotta, if you're working on a lower level, you forget a tool in the machine shop. On the top level, you gotta go up and down. yeah, it's definitely interesting stuff you do. Something new every day. So
And I assume that there are assignments that you have as from the school that you have to get sort of checked off while you're at sea. How do you work those into your daily routine?
well, in each of my SEER projects, I have sign-offs that the licensed engineer has to sign off on. So there are typical operations that happen on board ships, and you just have to you have to know what sign-offs you have and haven't done, and you have to know what's going on each day. So if one of your sign-offs is going on, you have to ask to participate if you're not assigned to it, or something like that, so to ensure you get your sign-offs.
Okay. Sounds like a lot of scheduling, maybe mental scheduling that you have to do for yourself.
Yeah, you definitely have to be on top of it.
Okay. And so this is kind of a typical routine. Are there things that might break your typical routine? For example, if there was an emergency on the ship, or if you were coming into or out of port, or anything else that you can think of?
Sure, yeah. Emergency would definitely break the routine. So, say you had a generator explode and it was right at 12 o'clock, you're definitely not gonna go eat lunch, you're gonna take care of the generator that exploded.
Right.
And then if you're coming into and out of port, it definitely depends on the timing, but if you take the pilot on at 0300, you have to be down there at 0300. You can't wait until 0600 to go to work. You have to be there when you're maneuvering.
When you're maneuvering, you're responsible for what?
Me personally,
Or just people in the engine room?
in the engine room, because you're constantly changing speed, the pressures and temperatures of the engine, the cooling systems, the fuel are going to constantly fluctuate, and you have to have somebody there to monitor it, throttle valves as needed, and then maintain the electrical bus, because there's winches, there's the bow thruster that draw big loads, so you have to have somebody to monitor that.
Okay. And they would allow you to do that as a midshipman, a cadet?
Not me personally.
Not you personally, okay. And so you mentioned earlier your SEER projects. Can you sort of generally expand on what your projects are and what might be involved?
Every time you go out to sea, you get assigned SEER projects. So first sailing, me as an engineer, I had a propulsion project, a systems project, a deck project to familiarize myself with what they do up there, and then a machine shop project. And those just entailed getting familiar with stuff, getting familiar with operations, regulations, rules, and stuff like that, and then becoming proficient in the machine shop as well. And then my second sailing, I have a diesel project, a steam project, a systems project, a refrigeration one, electrical engineering one, maintenance management one, and a naval architecture project. And those are definitely more in depth than the first sailing ones, obviously. And it's definitely a lot of work, but you do learn a lot, and you definitely have to use all your resources while you're at sea to figure out answers to every question.
Right, so when you say a project, there is sort of a final report that you're going to be turning in and that you could potentially be, I don't know, interviewed or quizzed on, something like that?
Yeah, so you have to, it's a bunch of questions basically in the C project, and you have to type up long essay type answers and draw diagrams and pictures of stuff, and then in each project there's what's called STCW competencies, and that the STCW means Standards of Training, Certification, and Watch Keeping. And to get your Coast Guard license, you have to have verification that you can do all these competencies. So when you get back to school, you'll be quizzed on typical operations, regulations, and stuff like that, just so they can sign off and basically tell the Coast Guard that you can sit for your license exam.
Okay. So this is a little bit different from a typical engineering internship. I'm an engineer myself, and during my summer, I would go work for like a corporation and get some training, sort of on-the-job training. So this is not only on-the-job training, but it's got a serious component of schooling as well.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. So, did you find that there were some classes that translated well to working in the engine room and some that maybe were a little bit more abstract? I mean, did you really make the connection when you were out at sea between what you were learning in school with, actually working as an officer?
Well, yeah, there definitely are some classes that transfer over, but there certainly are classes that don't, like differential equations. You're not really going to be using that in the engine room. But there are some classes I took my plebe year, intro to marine engineering, intro to electrical engineering, classes like that. They really do apply to sea. So, and in those classes, you don't have any idea what's going on, because like, what's a sea chest? You don't know what that is. But when you go out to sea, and an engineer points out that, hey, that's a sea chest, everything makes sense.
Right.
So there definitely are a few classes that transfer over, get you prepared to go out to sea,
Mm-hmm.
and then there's ones that you have to take to get an engineering background, I guess.
It might make more sense further down the road as well, depending on if you go into design or something like that.
For sure.
Okay. Well, I think those are all the questions that I had for talking about what life at sea is like. And so I thank you for your time, John.
Absolutely.
And we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Sea Year Chronicles.